welcome back. We are going to be continuing on the topic of points of interest, how to identify points of interest. But at this point, we are going to be looking at the demand point of interest. How do you mark out your point of interest, for demand, for buy setups, okay? And of course, when you're talking about point of interest, we're talking about your order blocks as well. Now, order blocks is essentially the last price the market was at before the big move by institutions, okay? That last price that the market was at before the big institutions stepped into the market, to place their orders. And of course, at this point, we're going to be looking at those demand points of interest. All right, so let's quickly move on to the class. Okay, now the first of that kind of move is going to be what we call drop base rally. Drop base rally. When you're talking about drop, you are talking about the falling of price. When you're talking about rally, you are talking about the upward movement of price. Okay, the upward movement of price is what we call rally. The downward movement of price is what we call drop. Now, when you're talking about base is essentially the last space of the last price the market was at before before the movement happened, before that big movement happened. So we're talking about base, you are essentially talking about order block. When you're talking about base, you are essentially talking about that your point, the point of interest. I hope you understand that. So when you're talking about base is the same thing as your order block, is the same thing as your POI, which is point of interest. Of course, you know that order block, you can also call that OB, for short. You can call your order block OB for short, and you call points of interest POI, for short. So I might be using that, I might actually be using OB, using POI. So basically, you know what that is from this point, okay? All right. Now look at the example we have on the screen. You can see that there was a drop in price, okay, and from this point forward there was a big move. There was a big move to the upside, right? There was a big move to the upside, and price simply just came back into that particular zone. Now, how do you know that or what that zone is? It is because we marked out the last candle, the last bearish candle before the big move started. The last bearish candle is our OP, is our point of interest. Okay, that is our point of interest, is our POI. We can also say it's our base, it's also our OP. Okay, so we marked out that and we simply waited for price to pull into that particular place. Of course, it's actually a demand zone because we are expecting that when price gets into that particular place, price is going to go back up. So it means that we are actually buying, we are looking forward to buy at the demand zone. Okay, we are looking forward to buy at the demand zone. So you can see that when price simply just came back into that particular, into that demand zone, the price simply just went back up. So this kind of setup is what we call drop base rally. Price drops and there was an upward movement, a sharp upward movement, upward movement, and price simply came back into our base and price simply went back up again. Okay, now this is another example of drop based rally. You can see this example is taken from pound sterling against USD. It's actually a forex pair. All right. So for those of us that will be trading forex, so I'm actually taking this example from forex pair GBP USD. All right. So from what we can see here, there is a drop in price because all these small candles, all these red candles, they are what they are actually bearish. They are bearish candles. Of course, I have actually told you before that you can choose what color your own candlesticks will be. Some people use green candles for their own, bullish candles, use, magenta, purple, whatever it is for their own, whatever. It depends on exactly what you want. So, but just for the sake of this, so just understand that these red candles are actually your bearish, and they are actually bearish candles. Now look at this drop. There was a drop in price, okay, and there was a sharp movement. Look at this. These big candles here can only happen because of institutions. It takes several millions of dollars to make this kind of movement happen in the market. Okay, so now what is the last candle before this big movement? And that is the candle here. Okay, and this candle here, this doji candle, becomes our base. It becomes our order block. It becomes the area of our interest. That is our POI. I hope you really understand that. Now, look at what happened. So this is what we call drop base rally. Drop, it formed a base, and there is a what? There is a rally to the upside. Now, look at what happened. Price came into that zone that we marked out our demand zone. And what happened next? Price simply what? Went back up. All right. So let's look at this again. Now, another example of drop based rally. Now, look at all of these small candles, these small bodied candles. But basically, it's actually small bodied candles, but they were actually heading to the downside. All right, they are actually dropping. So they actually what they are forming drop at this particular moment. All right. Now look at what happened. At some point, there was this big movement to the upside. These big movements, look at the candles, they are really big. Again, it takes institutions to make this kind of big move. Okay, when you see this kind of big moves, it takes institutions to make that kind of big moves. I'm going to repeat this again. When you see this kind of big moves, it takes institutions to make that kind of moves, because it takes several millions of dollars to really make that kind of moves. Retailers don't make that kind of move in the market. Okay, now, so this is a drop base. Your base is that last candle before the big movement began. Your base is the last candle, the last small candle, the last small bearish candle before the big move began. In the case of a demand, right? So we have our base marked out, and we simply wait for price to what? To tap into that demand zone, into our POI. And what happened next? As price dropped into that particular place, price did what? Price moved back up. Okay, all right. So there's another example of demand pattern. We call it demand continuation pattern. Demand continuation pattern, which is essentially about rally based rally. So In rally-based rally, it simply means that price was already what was actually already shooting to the upside, and it formed a base, a series of small bodied candles, okay, and there's another big upward movement. As you can see from this side, there is a small candle here followed by a big candle. There was a series of small bodied candles again, and there is a big movement. Now, this is what we call rally. The big movement, the first big movement is a rally. Then it formed a base, which are a group of small bodied candles. Then there is another big move to the upside. Okay. Now, in this case, you are going to mark out this particular, this is a valid demand zone. This is also a valid demand zone. The first one here is a valid demand zone. This second one is also a valid demand zone. And you can mark out the two. But our first point of interest is going to be this second one. And our second point of interest is going to be the first one. The first the first base. And what we're going to do with that, we are going to be I'm going to be talking, I'm going to be discussing that with you. But at least for now, you can mark out the the two zones. The two zones are what? They are actually valid POIs. All right. These are another example of rally base rally. These are another example of rally base rally. It's just as the other example. Okay. It's just as the other example. All right. So at this point, I'm going to ask you to please practice on your MT4 or your MT5 or trading view. Okay, you are going to, have to get yourself accustomed to of these, all of these things. All right. So this is going to be the end of this particular model. I'm going to see you in the next.